I am on the big screen, aren't I? And I even confirmed got it, so the meeting being recorded. Can I share my screen then? Is that?
Please do. Please do,
yep.
Tim. Yeah.
So hopefully you're now seeing a purple slide. Is that right?
Yeah. And do you want to put it onto slideshow mode?
Can do means I lose sight of you, I think, but that might be the best thing for the audience. Yeah. Is that it now?
Yeah, that's it. Great.
Good. Okay. So yes, I'm Tim Gaston. I'm the Director of Public Transport Services. I'm not all things public transport, thankfully. Many other people can lay that claim, but not me. But I have been involved in public transport for quite some time, and I'm delighted to be involved in the Connecting Ireland project. It's one of the few things that really get me quite excited, and you'll hopefully understand and share that enthusiasm as I talk a little bit about the programme. I'm going to just run through a few slides and hopefully give you an insight as to what the NTA does, but more importantly, what's the relevance for rural Ireland. We start at the beginning. Our corporate plan, which we're just revising for the next few years, it's not going to change dramatically, of course, is to provide high quality, accessible, sustainable transport connecting people across Ireland. I'm going to be very brutally honest here and expose, I suppose, myself to comments. I'm sure that will come back from some people, but we do this better in some places than we do in others. And we would not say that we provide high quality, accessible, sustainable transport across all of Ireland right now. We do in many places, and cities and towns are getting better quite quickly with Bus Connects and other programs, and still some way to go there. Whereas in rural Ireland, we provide, I would say, good quality, accessible, sustainable transport in many places, but not universally across Ireland by any means. One of the challenges we face is to do with the distribution of Ireland's population. This is the CSO stats from 2016. A couple of things jump off the page for me here. One is that cities are 34% of the population. So about a third of us live in cities, 16% in large towns. But 37% and 13% respectively live in either village and open countryside or small towns, and that creates a huge problem. So we have 2.5 million or more who are not living in close proximity to other people. In villages, we've used the term settlements, and we've settled on using the other government definitions, NDP and so on, a settlement being 50 homes or thereabouts and a population of about 200. That's a very small number of people to connect, and even that only picks up the sum of the 37%. There's half or more of that 37% that actually just live in open countryside. It's one of the nice features about Ireland, but it is also one of the challenges in that it's virtually impossible to provide a universal public transport experience for those people using regular scheduled services. But I'll talk about other options that we're going to be exploring over the next year or two in that space. But this is a context piece that's important to remember. People who live in rural Ireland, of course, will be very aware of that. There's also the government strategies context. I'm not going to dwell on this very long, but just to be aware that Connecting Ireland and the things relating to it do feature in our Rural Future programme, which is something we support, the Rural Development Policy, the National Development Plan, where we follow that very closely, as we do the National Planning Framework. The Climate Action Plan, we feature in that as well, and of course we're heavily featured in the department's own National Sustainable Mobility Policy. So the good news is that there's a high level of consistency across all of these strategies. They were built like building blocks, if you like, on top of each other, and there's not, one doesn't contradict the other. They actually, we find, and we enjoy working under the if you like, the vires or the control that comes from these policies, and they do work together. We're delighted to be part of that process. What is Tfa Local Link? Local Link is a brand name that we gave to the Rural Transport Programme. The Rural Transport Programme has been running in Ireland for many, many years, and many people on the call have been heavily involved in providing public transport to large numbers of people across the state for a very long time, and doing it extremely well. It's always heartwarming to go and meet with people who participate in Local Link, either as drivers, schedulers, managers, and particularly the customers. And in many places, it's a lifeline. And there's no doubt that the two different types of services that are being provided work very well together. And where they work very well. I think during COVID in particular, the whole Local Link, the Tfa Local Link, the managers, the staff, and the drivers really rose to the challenge of COVID in many places. And in fact, rather than moving people, because people weren't able to move, particularly maybe older people or people with vulnerabilities, they moved goods. So they were actually picking up shopping lists from people and delivering them out to homes and checking in with people to make sure they were there. And that was just, fantastic to read many stories and incidents of that across the country. But in more normal times, Local Link provides two main types of services. There's rural regular services, which, as the name suggests, run to a schedule on a scheduled route against a timetable, not dissimilar to the services that Bus Éireann and many of our commercial colleagues run, but typically on maybe smaller vehicles in some cases, although not always. In some cases, it's bigger buses as well. But the mainstay of Local Link has been the DRT, and it's door to door if it needs to be. So people who wheelchair ridden or have mobility issues are able to contact their Local Link office, arrange for typically it would be several days in a week that the service would operate in their area, and arrange to be collected. The driver gets notification of that on his app that he has that particular client to pick up, and the drivers are trained to make sure that they're safely, wheelchairs are safely boarded and so on. Most of our vehicles, not all, but most of the vehicles in use are low floor, and we're moving to try and improve that. So two main types of services, the rural regular and the DRT, and we'll talk more about those as we go through the day, I suspect, through the webinar. Just to put some facts behind it, the funding was in the order of 12 million in 2016. When we brought in the rural regular, those clearly brought a very significant increase in the budget, and the budget was 25 million last year and similar this year, slightly higher this year, in fact. And then if you bring in the Connecting Ireland budget, it takes it up higher again. Passenger numbers were growing very nicely through to 2019. 2019 was a bumper year right across all public transport. We broke records everywhere, including in rural Ireland. And then, of course, COVID came along and completely took the wind from our sails. And we dropped by almost half. 2021 wasn't much better. The good news is the first half of this year, so Q1, Q2, the first half of 2022, we're at 1.1 million passenger journeys and growing. Rural regular is now sitting significantly higher than it's ever been, and we'll be back at the 2019 levels next year. We're very sure, in fact, it will be surpassing those. So it's a joy to be part of something that's growing at the rate that it is growing, and it's a credit to everyone involved, from the staff, the operators, the schedulers, the managers, the Laughing and her team in NTA as well, who've really worked so hard to see this service develop and grow. I'm going to touch briefly on this. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I'm not the expert in this space, but there's someone on the call who is. Fiona's going to give you more detail on this later on. But essentially, we have worked as well to try and bring in other key stakeholders. The HSE is one that we've worked with. In fairness, probably closer and more aligned in some parts of the country than others. And we would love to see this model develop and grow across the country. But we launched a pilot scheme in Leitrim, cost in order of €500,000 of government funding to support us in this. And what we took was a large number of closed routes. So these were routes that HSE were funding from transport operators that were specifically to pick up specific clients and bring them into specific locations. And the team looked at those and said, we can run those same routes with vehicles that allow other and support other customers as well, and move them from being closed to being open. And a network of 8 or more rural regular services were implemented. And the other advantage of moving to Local Link provided is, of course, people with the free travel pass, the Department of Social Protection free travel pass, were able to travel free, where previously for some of the closed services there was a charge. So it was a bit of a win-win. It took a lot of work, Fiona and the team, to get out the routes sorted out. There had to be a lot of toing and froing with the clients as well to make sure that they were comfortable getting on a service that previously they had pretty much exclusively to themselves, and then it was being shared with others. But that has actually now matured very well, and as you can see in a second, I'll show the graph that shows just the growth that we've had in that. The features of it are many, but the vehicles are newer. They're all accessible with the low floor, which is fantastic. We added in almost 500,000 additional kilometres, which is quite a phenomenal growth in a county the size of Leitrim. So it really brought about significant improved connectivity it covered the passengers who previously had been using the service, but it opened it up to a vast number of other people who had public transport that previously they didn't have. And as you can see, and as I'll just describe on this chart, with the passenger numbers in that area were running at around 1,500 to 2,000 passengers on a weekly basis, and it's now grown over 3.5, heading for 4,000. So we've well more than doubled the passenger numbers using the service, even back from pre-COVID days, and that's an absolute win-win. Yes, it comes with investment, but this is where this is this type of investment that the NTA really is keen to support and get support from government to deliver more of. What are we doing next? We're working on a number of areas. We are working to improve the fleet largely by encouraging businesses that come in through tenders. We also had a full stone of trying to provide vehicles ourselves, but we're going to have another stab at that in the not too distant future. We are moving to electric vehicles. This is proving challenging, and anybody who's thought about moving to electric themselves will probably understand the charging infrastructure is obviously absolutely crucial, and getting the right vehicle with the right features
Kevin,
at a price that's affordable.
Not too bad, not too bad at all.
Just doing a little bit of muting there. Sorry, Tim. I'll just ask you to unmute again and carry on. You'll just need to unmute yourself, Tim. Yeah. Tim, great.
How's that?
Okay.
How's
yeah.
that?
Carry on.
And then do I need to reshare?
No, you're still sharing screen. You could put it back into slideshow mode. Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully this will work. There's that.
Yeah, that's great. Apologies,
Okay.
and do carry on. Yeah.
No problem. So a lot of work going on with the fleet. We're about to launch in Dingle 2 electric buses. It's been a learning curve for all of us to get a yard that's safe, that's free of other contamination, that has the appropriate charging in it, that's suitable for the vehicles. We're nearly there, but we keep thinking we're nearly there. But we're very confident we'll be launching it within the next few weeks in the Dingle Peninsula 2 electric vehicles, and that will set hopefully in train the opportunity to learn from how the challenges we face there and bring in more electric vehicles across the fleet. We've set ourselves a target, or government has set us the target of having at least 10% of electric vehicles by 2025, which is no mean feat, but we are working on it. A real plus for me, because it's been a bugbear for a long time that we've not been able to provide a good ticketing solution to Local Link. Many of the Local Link offices have gone and provided their own, but which we supported, of course. But we now have got, I think, a really good solution coming out using the Tfa Go app, and Local Link customers have really taken to that. For those who need to buy a ticket, free travel pass holders, of course, don't need to buy a ticket, but for those who do, the Tfa Go app is proving really popular, and we're in the middle of rolling that out along with some ticketing equipment as well. FAL Lite, that's a bit slightly techie term. I'll just explain what that is. It's automatic vehicle location. So as we roll out equipment on buses, we hope to be able to track those buses and either show it on a map, as for some of you who maybe use your taxi apps, you can see that, or the apps that other transport providers are showing, or also to feed it into real time. And therefore into journey planner information as well. This one's going to take a while to mature, but we are keen to see a light version of that. The fact that it's light just means that it doesn't have the, in the cities, we track a vehicle and get a signal from it every 20 seconds so that we can update real-time passenger information and so on. It doesn't need to be as intensive as that, but we do intend to provide a real-time solution across rural Ireland over the next 2 or 3 years. We've made good strides in marketing and promotions, and again, full marks to the TCU, the Transport Coordination Unit managers, the Local Link managers around the country, and that we've provided quite a lot of material centrally, but they've taken ownership of that and using that to promote. And recent surveys, we've seen the awareness of Local Link has gone up quite dramatically, but also the local promotions are bringing people on board on the services, which is supporting the service growth. I talked earlier about the challenge for a very dispersed population, and this is where the non-conventional measures comes in, and it's something that we would like to get a pilot off the ground on, possibly using something along the lines of an app-based DRT, where client, rather than needing to phone into an office and discuss the details, can simply order their service online, and then the app works out using an algorithm that we can provide a a vehicle in your area. It may not be exactly when you want it, but it might be, say, 15 minutes or 20 minutes later. It may not be exact location, unless it has to be if you have a mobility issue. And so it'll take you from near where you want to go to near where you want to get to, near from where you're starting to near to where you're finishing, and you can then accept that offer, if you like, of transport, and then the driver gets that message to be at that point to pick you up. I've seen them working myself in GB, and they work well, but they do need to be funded. They're unlikely to make money, unlikely to be profitable, so this will need to be funded. The problem in the GB schemes is that businesses were running them, trying to run them profitably, and it was proving very, very difficult. But we will get government support, we hope, to see these measures being rolled out. And then the big piece is Connecting Ireland, I was talking about earlier, expanding the network using the Connecting Ireland Rural Mobility Plan. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Connecting Ireland is now. It's a 5-year program. It's a program of intensification. It's not anything magical and new in one sense. We did do a detailed survey across Ireland of all the capabilities of public transport, and we found that some counties had better connected and better interconnectivity than others, and there was a very significant lack of investment nationally. So we've identified a program to really intensify the delivery of public transport services, rural regular, DRT, talking to our commercial colleagues, talking with Bus Éireann as well, and really working hard to make those services a lot more useful in the times they operate, the places they visit, and the interconnectivity with trains and other big bus services. So it is regional and local service improvements, and we will, as I was saying earlier, be piloting some non-conventional. So we're increasing the quantity, we're driving up the quality, but trying to make it more useful, and it is plan-led. Marion Wilson and the service planning team at NTA are pretty much dedicated now to the process of developing and growing the Connecting Ireland programme across Ireland. We have a budget of 5.6 million to spend this year on it, and we're putting together the budget for next year to accommodate the growth that we envisage coming through into next year. Most of the activity will be at local link service level itself, so either more or regular or improved DRT. So about 75% of the overall plan is that focus there. About 22% is Bus Éireann's PSO, that public service obligation. So the Bus Éireann subsidised services, some of those will be significantly enhanced as well. And then there will be some opportunity to discuss with commercial operators. We've said 3% there, but that could easily be higher. Happy to have discussions with operators and see if licenses can be extended or new licenses can be given out. So there's an opportunity there as well. So 2 to 3 proposals per local link area. We've tried to make sure that there's something for everyone in the audience, so to speak, and we've tried to be as national as possible. And we had an opportunity with additional funding that was provided to provide support for the refugees, mainly entirely Ukrainian refugees, and we've been able to accelerate some of the Connecting Ireland proposals because they happen to coincide with locations spread right across the country where refugees have been allocated. So that's been a helpful improvement. We are continuing the detailed planning, working very closely with our colleagues in the local link offices. And we've also had some discussions with Irish Rail, and we're hoping to bring some opportunities forward for improved integration with Irish Rail and improved rail services. So I've said any questions, but I'll hand back to you, Ali, because I'm not sure whether you want to take questions now or at some point in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Tim. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, we won't take questions straight away now, but thank you for such a rich presentation and update on everything you're doing. Really is probably the perfect opening to what we're going to be discussing today. So I will keep us moving on. So with great thanks to Tim. And now I'm delighted to announce we actually have a number of esteemed guests with us today. So one is we have Minister Joe O'Brien, and we'll be hearing from you, Minister O'Brien, as we come towards the end of our forum today. And we also have Minister Eamon Ryan, so Minister for Transport and for Environment, Climate and Communications. So Minister, if I could just bring you up here on the big screen. and invite you just to make a few remarks at the opening here, as we're sort of in the beginning stages of our first Rural Ideas Forum on public transport for rural Ireland in 2022. Over to you, and just inviting you to unmute.
Thank you, Ali, and good morning, everyone. And I'm very glad to follow on from Tim, because actually a lot of what he said out there is central to what we are doing in the Department of Transport and what we look to do in the next 5 years. I think that Connecting Ireland project is probably, I keep saying it in any other forum I'm in, I might as well say it here, I think it's one of our most important, if not the most important, transport project we have. That graph he showed at the start of 37% of the population outside towns and cities are probably the ones that are least served, as he said as well, correctly at the start, in terms of what we're doing in public transport. Just very briefly, if I can maybe add to or back up what he's saying, and if I can, put a climate context on it, because that's just to, I suppose, keep people informed on what we're doing in that area, which is one of the key strategic drivers in our whole transport system. We have to halve our emissions this decade. That's beyond compare challenging. And we have to do it in a way that leads to a better system. We won't get there if it's just punitive, wagging the finger at people, telling them they're doing the wrong thing. We have to provide a better alternative. And I think we can and will do that. Very briefly, very high level, just to kind of sense, and this then filters down to what we need to do in rural Ireland, as well as in our towns and cities. We need to do 4 things. We need to switch fuels. We need to switch away from the use of fossil fuels, not just for climate reasons, but also we can see the risk we have in terms of being dependent on those imported fuels when the price, as it's done in the last year, goes through the roof. And that will be largely for personal travel. That will be largely electrification. Electric cars are better, will be cheaper. They're pretty much there already in terms of overall cost. And for rural Ireland, actually, there's real potential, because one of the biggest challenges we have in switching to electric is, where do you get the charging infrastructure, particularly in cities? If you're in a terraced street or in an apartment, really hard to see how we do the home charging, whereas that in rural Ireland is much less of an issue. So I think that in some ways people I think the first area where it really become the mainstream alternative will be in rural Ireland. Secondly, though, it's not just changing the vehicles. We do need a shift to public transport and to active travel. And I think that's why Connecting Ireland is so important, that options and alternatives is really key. And I just to back up what Tim was saying, what I was really interested there is not just the work we're doing in terms of the new routes and those 2 to 3 routes in each local area, but I think using that app, the Transport for Ireland app, using that vehicle tracking system, backing up what he was saying, that new kind of looking to do similar to what they have, he said, in the UK, new scheme where we have this demand response type system where close to where you're coming from to close to where you go to. I think that coupled with the opening up of closed routes, the way that was done in Leitrim, and that could, in my mind, extend into, we're reviewing our whole school transport system. So if we can integrate in some ways our health transport system, our schools transport system, and our rural transport system in a way that delivers some of those efficiencies, I think that's where there's real potential. And I think the use of those apps and that digital technology to provide a really flexible, innovative service, that's really the key next step, it seems to me. And as Tim says, and just to back that up, if we're able to get working models of that, the way we did test this new Connecting Ireland service in both Leitrim and in Kerry, around the Dingle Peninsula, I think that's the next iteration is going to be in that looking at how we use this digital technology and automated systems, algorithms, as he said, to provide new types of services. I think that's where I'm really interested to see what innovation might come there. The third change in climate and transport is around reducing the volume of transport. And because even with switching to all the electric vehicles, even with switching to the public transport the way we want, we still won't meet our climate targets. And I think it is something like a 25% reduction in overall transport demand we're looking to do. And that's not going to be easy, but I think, again, it'll only work where it's for the better for people. And I do think coming out of COVID, the whole remote working, the potential actually for a real revival in some of the economic opportunities outside our cities and large towns, it means that we might be able to meet that target and see a growth and a thriving in rural Ireland. That third reduction in the overall volume of transport is going to be the really interesting one. And lastly, there are four kind of legs to this stool. It is in sharing, and because a lot of the expense of cars or expense in public transport system is, we have to look to see how we do this in a way that's really efficient and not become just dependent on imported batteries in the way that we're dependent on imported fossil fuels. So come back to what Tim was saying around that, innovative apps around ride sharing or other sort of systems, I think could well be an integral part of that. Just again, I'm taking the climate focus here, but because it's going to affect everything. In government, we have our National Development Plan with budgets clearly set out. We have also established in sustainable mobility a leadership group within the Department of Transport to bring together other government departments, other agencies, and to listen to outside perspectives. Today is part of that, to see how do we deliver on the sustainable mobility goals that we have. Central to that has been working with local authorities. We're 2 weeks' time now, we've set a deadline for them to make their proposals around what we're calling Pathfinder projects, where it might be a whole range of different, but promoting sustainable mobility, projects that we might already have in train, but we might want to accelerate, that we might want to make sure it gets priority for funding, particularly for funding as soon as possible, this year, next year, the year after. We're focusing very much on the immediate next 2 years, through 2 to 3 years, in terms of making this switch towards a much more sustainable mobility system. And that could range from new rural transport, some of what we were talking about earlier, what Tim was talking about, that's innovation around how we integrate our local link services. It could be new town centre or village centre transport hubs. I've been talking to some county councils around the country who are coming forward with those sort of ideas. It might be really innovative new way looking at safe routes to schools, which is a critical element to switching to our mobilities, making it safe for our children to walk and cycle to school or get the bus to school again. So I'm really keen if anyone, I suppose on this call, is that people would work with their local authorities and encourage and support that pathfinder approach, that it can't be just talk now. We need real change on the ground, real examples, working examples of new ways of doing things. And learning by doing. If things we find, okay, try that, doesn't work, that's not a problem. We should be willing to take risks and innovate and do things differently, and then reverse and go a different way if we find that it hasn't worked for whatever variety of different reason. So I'm very glad to be here today. I don't know if I'll be able to stay for the entire thing to listen to my colleague Joe's presentation, but I really appreciate the chance to give these opening remarks. And really, I suppose, more than anything else, support what I see as a real positive time in what NTA is doing, what the local link services are capable of doing. And we really want in the Department of Transport to support that and provide an environment where it can flourish and thrive. Thank you, Anne.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Minister Ryan. And just to say that we've had requests coming in. There's a couple of questions coming in the chat. I know there's one from you as well, Kieran. We're not actually doing an open floor for questions and remarks at this point. We will be collecting all of the points and questions and remarks people are making. We'll be discussing later. I know, Minister Ryan, you may not be with us, but we'll also be inviting you to note them down. So, Kieran, if you could put your point then, and just to say thank you, Minister Ryan, and we'll keep moving on for now so we can continue moving into the discussion. And I am delighted to now introduce Deirdre de Vollish, General Manager of the Dingle Creativity and Innovation Hub, which I know when I was asking about it before is basically founded on a passion for sustainability initiatives, and look forward to hearing a lot more about that and following on from what we've heard from Tim and Minister Ryan's remarks with some real examples and your experience and practice. So Deirdre, just inviting you to bring up, I know you have some slides to bring up, you can get them ready now, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Many thanks, Ali. The problem with coming third is now that I feel I'll be repeating everything that I have just heard there, but perhaps that's a good thing. I am echoing, what I'm seeing on the ground, which means we have a good connection between policy and what is actually happening on the ground. So thanks very much for the invitation today to share our story. My name is Deirdre Devalish. I'm the manager of the Dingle Hub. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Kirkaghoina or the Dingle Peninsula, it is in the southwest of Ireland, and it extends 48 kilometres into the Atlantic and has an area of 583 square kilometres. We have a resident population of almost 13,000, but importantly, we see visitors in excess of 1 million annually. And that variation, I suppose, is something that's been very important in many of the a very important factor in many of the innovation projects that have been undertaken here. Private car use here is still the main mode of transport to travel across the peninsula. And we know from our energy master plan that transport accounts for 54% of our energy use. And also that 28% of people travel outside the peninsula for work, although I do imagine we have to re-look at that again post-COVID now. And we'll see maybe that modal shift or that reduction as more people work from home. And we can certainly see the effects of that in the remote working hub that we run here. The good news is that the majority of people, there was a socio-economic plan run by Northeast West Kerry Development, and they found that the majority were in favour of using public transport or transitioning to more climate-friendly modes of transport. So we know that the appetite is here, and it's about working with people to empower them. So the Dingle Hub has evolved to become a focal point in the community for sustainability initiatives. And we believe that a significant opportunity exists to leverage the investments made across the Connected Hubs network by incentivising hubs to support their communities in the transition to a low carbon society. Our own mission is to build that creative, livable, sustainable and inclusive community to really foster the ecosystem that's necessary to facilitate the creation and maintenance of well-paid year-round incomes on the Dingle Peninsula. And that goes to Minister Ryan's point about, an economic revival in rural areas. There are real opportunities here, and it is all linked to the innovative solutions that we can come up with for climate change. We deliver on this mission through 4 strategic platforms. For today's purpose, the strategic platform 2 is the most relevant, where we focus our efforts to build the ecosystem necessary by working with an extensive and diverse range of stakeholders, including government bodies, state agencies, corporate entities, and the local community to develop projects in 3 key areas. And that is sustainability, the digital transformation, and the Dingle Peninsula is a magnet for creative people, so it's the creative industries as well here. And it's integrating all of those 3 pillars and getting them to work together. So this has enabled over time new local companies to emerge, having identified opportunities to working with us on these projects. And the 4th pillar then is working with the work from home and learn from home community and leveraging their really, extensive expertise and networks and connecting them in to the various projects that we are doing here. So Kirkaghoina, and this slide here just, I suppose, shows the breadth of all the partnerships that we have developed over the course of the last 4 years. We have projects running with all of these bodies and funded by the various agencies. Kirkaghoina has been designated as the decarbonisation zone for Kerry, and we're now working with Kerry County Council to really develop the plans for that. Of course, they'll also have applicability outside of the peninsula and outside of Kerry, and we work very closely with, excuse me, Udar Osna Gaeltacht through their Gaeltacht Glass Working Group. So I mentioned that we know that 54% of our energy use relates to transport. So interestingly, we had an estimate within that for the agricultural sector, but we have now learned that that fell well below the actual number. So there's 130 dairy farmers here in the peninsula who've established a sustainable energy community, and they're working on their energy master plan, and they have learned that collectively they spend a total of 750,000 annually on agri-diesel, and that's a subvented agri-diesel as well, and no doubt that cost is continuing to rise, and that doesn't even include the agricultural contractors on the peninsula. It certainly came as a surprise to everyone, but it can be viewed most definitely as an opportunity here as well. The engaged research team in Marai have worked closely with us over the past 4 years and have helped us to break down what national targets mean in real terms for the peninsula. This shows the peninsula level numbers here, but we went further to break down the numbers to electoral district level. And at the community workshops run for the socioeconomic planning, we could share with people that, say, in the small village of Castle Gregory, 265 of those people would own electric vehicles by 2030. And this made it very real for people, and many people who might not have even considered up to that point that change would be necessary. This is an overview of the sustainability projects underway here and the pipeline of those to come. So as a key point for us is it has to be an integrated set of solutions for everything. So we don't tackle transport alone. It is embedded within a range of solutions that are addressing climate change. But the importance of having an organization like the Hub in place is to provide that institutional memory and capacity that enables continuity of projects, and that importance should not be underestimated. Your projects are always time limited. They have to be with specific goals, but they tend to fall off a cliff once they are complete. So we seek to continually build on the work being done through projects to ensure there is real long-term impact locally. To highlight just one project here, we've had the benefit of electric vehicle trials on the peninsula to the ESB Networks project. So we have a group of local ambassadors who are trusted to provide reliable information on the use of EVs in a rural area. And again, back to the Minister's point, it is absolutely the experience here that they're far more suitable in a rural area than in an urban area. Already since the trial finished, 7 of the 15 participants have purchased their own EVs, and they're sharing their experiences with their neighbours, with their friends, and that is very trusted information. You know, I have had people come to me to say the car salespeople tell them, oh, don't buy the electric vehicles, they're not suitable in rural areas. We absolutely can affirm that they are here, and we have the data to back it up from ESB Networks. We've taken the opportunity to share with the community through digital means. We have run many Instagram series and Facebook, a lovely series on Dingle Adapts Energy. We took one of the electric vehicles to COP26 over on a journey, really put it to the test, going into a different country, trying to download the different apps. But we blogged about that experience on the way, and the overriding feedback locally was people were really delighted to have a local connection with something that was so visible nationally and internationally at the time. But it was a warts and all experience on the EV, you know, very relatively simple to use within your own country where you have everything. But we had some fun and adventures on the way and shared them with the community. So building on the experience of the trial and all of the other sustainability projects underway, we have scoped out a pilot sustainable mobility project for the peninsula. And the key thing here is that we are seeking to integrate multimodal transport solutions. So it's not going to be any one solution on its own that's going to enable people to car shed. And that is really the simple objective of this. Can we reverse the trend towards multi-car households in a rural area? So to enable the broader modal shifts, one of the key things that we have to tackle is safety issues, and a lot of that will be around managing our tourist traffic here in the summer times, and there are plans in place for a management plan for that. It's also to introduce mobility as a service, to work with our youth advisory board here, the next generation, to see, do you really need to purchase a car? You know, what are the solutions that will work for you? It's also to encourage cycling, walking, carpooling, carpooling and car sharing will be absolutely critical. We can see the lovely initiatives from, I think it was Westport, the 15-minute town, asking people, you know, would this fleet of vehicles work for you? As we see the costs of, you know, vehicles now, do we really need to own those cars? Can we find the ways to share them? So to enhance sustainable public transport, the provision of bus stop and shelter infrastructure will be key. And also the introduction of a community car service is already in planning here. Tim mentioned the provision of the 2 electric buses, which we're waiting eagerly for, but they're so visible here. And what they do is they have a real catalyzing effect. You know, they stimulate the conversations that people need to see that change is happening. And of course, here on the peninsula, we have such a tourist market, it's highly visible as well. We see that, you know, in any project that we're running, effective marketing and communications is going to be very important. So if we can use that bus shelter infrastructure to quantify how the number of bus journeys undertaken is contributing to the overall reduction in emissions, that's very empowering for a local community. It's also the use of local radio here, giving a platform to our local ambassadors that stimulates the conversations necessary to lead to behaviour change. We need to paint the pictures of how the different modes of travel can appeal and be relevant and viable to different people. Can commuters use the bus to do their emails? Can kids use the bus to get to and from their sports training? Can it show them the independence that they can have? So I'd just like to back up, you know, what Tim was saying on the local link service. It has absolutely, you know, been such a huge benefit since it has come into the area, and it extends well beyond simply providing a transport solution to a breadth of benefits, which include reduced isolation, socioeconomic development, and enhanced tourist experiences. You know, I have some lovely examples of the interactions between the bus drivers and their passengers and their elderly passengers, and anecdotal evidence of how people, you know, are able to maintain independent living longer because of the services that are here. The usage numbers speak for themselves, and I'm very sure when we see the August numbers, they will dwarf August this year will dwarf August of last year here. So a hugely beneficial service. And finally, I just want to note that we have plans to develop our own biogas on the peninsula. So that's moving to the different fuels. There are many reasons why it could be a very suitable solution for rural Ireland to tackle the challenge of climate change. But its use as a fuel for a local transport market will really serve to unlock the major environmental benefits. We have an ideal market here, as I mentioned before, in the tractors and in the contracting machinery. We also have tour and fishing boats here, and there's opportunities within truck and bus fleets too for the use of that biogas. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to me there, and the suite of solutions that we see as viable for a remote rural area.
Great, thank you so much, Deirdre. I'll just stop your slides there, but that was just, there was so much there, and as you're saying, really great to hear what you're doing on the ground in Dingle. And just a few remarks that have been coming in. We've got different things coming in. One was, we got questions arising around, okay, well, we've got this whole sustainability angle, but then also, you know, the real focus is on public transport, and to what degree does that need to be really wedded or not, you know? So it's just a question that's coming up in the room. And then another one here just saying the Dingle Hub is an exemplar model for other rural regions, and maybe this could be made national. So just different things that are being sparked by what you shared. So thank you so much. And also there's a question around the slides. So I'll just leave that. Maybe my colleague Melissa could just let me know separately. I don't know if we're going to be able to share the presentation materials afterwards, but I'll wait to hear on that, and then I can announce that to the room. So Deirdre, if you don't mind, I will keep you up on stage, as it were, on the online stage, and I will bring back our other contributors today. So Tim, who we heard from at the beginning. So Tim, I'll just find you there. And then I would also like to introduce our further two contributors. So first of all, let me find here, we've got Fiona. Yes, okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll just bring each of you up and then just do a little bit of introduction. There we are. So hopefully everyone should be able to see myself and our 4 guest speakers today. So first of all, so we've met Tim and Deirdre, which is fantastic. Now we're joined by Fiona O'Shea. So Fiona, you are the Tfa Local Link Manager in Donegal, Sligo and Leitrim. I would say sort of similar when we were chatting earlier with Deirdre as well, you also have a real mission to make things as sustainable as possible and to really meet the challenges of that head on, whatever they may be. So looking forward to hearing more about that in our conversation. And then Seamus, great to work with you again. Seamus, I know you've been part of our Rural Ideas Fora already in last year. Seamus Boland is the CEO of Irish Rural Link. And you've been involved in rural transport going a long way back, I think, since the Irish Rural Link was founded. There's a number of things that are part of what you're doing, particularly also looking for greater integration between various forms of transport. And again, I think we'll get to hear more as we go into the questions. So just a really warm welcome to all 4 of our contributors today. And what we are going to be doing now is it would just be great to have a conversation together. We have different questions that we thought would be of most interest to us here gathered in the forum. So I'll put them, maybe at times I will put them to one of you first or one of you particularly, and otherwise, you know, anyone can feel free to respond. And we have about, let's say, maybe 35, 40 minutes for this. And then we'll be going into more conversation and also hearing from the floor, as we've been promising. And I know people have had questions coming through already into the chat. So let's get going with our panel conversation and just inviting everyone who's with us to sit back, relax, and really kind of follow what's coming up in this particular conversation. So I think I'm going to turn to you first, Seamus, having just joined us, and to really, and as I was saying, I know that you shared with me this kind of real integration of different transport services is a real focus of Irish Rural Link. So if maybe you could just answer for us, what is the importance of transport services to sustainable rural development? Why is that so essential? How does that fit into the picture? And oh yes, I'll need to just ask you to unmute. You should have a little pop-up there. And I'll do that now for you, Fiona, and for you, Tim. It's just the way that I'm holding the room. So maybe you all just want to unmute if you feel comfortable, and we'll be ready to have a flowing conversation. Great. So Seamus, over to you. What's the importance of transport services for sustainable rural development?
Well, thank you very much, Ali, and may I just commend the presentations. I'm always inspired by Tim Gaston, who is, as he said, passionate about this subject. I haven't met you, Deirdre, but that was a brilliant presentation, and I have to say I wish your program was in most parts, if not all parts of the country, because really I think we're looking at the way forward. And just to say, Ali, I mean, Irish Rural Link in the very early days, one of the main things we identified was transport. And back when we were formed, even before I joined in the 90s, but I was a member, and it was a real issue, and it has remained a rural issue right up to the present day. And I think what we're seeing is, of course, with the improvements and the development of Local Link, we're seeing a range of, I suppose, progression in terms of the provision of rural transport. So Irish Rural Link would be hugely, and their members would be hugely supportive of Local Link and the various work done, and also the integration of transport into the NTA. And I think Minister Ryan was very clear in terms of outlining that. The question, I suppose, is why is it so important? It is really important because we have to find ways and means to access or give access to people to services, to employment, to health situations, or simply access to leisure facilities, whether it is going to matches or going to football or outdoor events, or simply going to the local activities in the wintertime and summertime, like the pubs, and keeping villages open. Indeed, transport is one of the main things needed to keep villages open and to keep people in a situation where they can actually connect and meet. I suppose the biggest issue in terms of rural transport, Ali, has always been how do you manage the connections, particularly that 37% figure on Tim's graph. That's a difficult, as he rightly pointed out, one to manage. But there are developments, and there's some good developments in that area, but we need to look at more. Equally, we need to look at how we manage even transport within what I would call the medium size, even to smaller rural towns, provincial towns. Sometimes it can be harder to negotiate from one side of the town to another than it is to get from 10 kilometers into the town, and that can be an interesting issue. But just to finish on this question, I think all of the presentations talked about the socioeconomic benefit, the isolation, and the role transport plays in dealing with isolation, the role transport plays in managing a better economic and sustainable future, and indeed the role, as Minister Ryan put it very strongly, in dealing with climate change. So we need to find the solutions based and built on the program that Deirdre has talked about, built on the local link programs that are there, and built on the extensive work undertaken by the National Travel Agency. I think, one of our great dreams in IRL has always been to see rural transport integrated into the wider thinking of transport provision. And I think the NTA was a great start in that area. But I think we've a good bit to go, because to finish on this point, Ali, in our rural regional meetings that we would hold, I have to say that rural transport is still a big issue raised all of the time, and many people still have huge issues and problems trying to resolve it for their own benefit and for their own communities.
Thank you, Seamus. And it's actually interesting there just to hear that we'd had this question before about, is this just about sustainability, or what is, this is the great importance of the public transport in our rural areas. But I think, as you pointed to, there's also just the overcoming the isolation that arises otherwise when this system is not fully integrated. So it's really, and that's, you could say, sustainability in the biggest sense, but it's not just climate, it's us, it's our communities, it's our members of our villages and towns. So thank you, Seamus. And maybe hearing about the wonderful work of the local links, perhaps I could turn to you, Fiona, and just, is there anything you would add to that on, or how you see it in terms of the importance of transport services to sustainable rural development?
Yeah, it is. I suppose from our point of view, when we would look at transport in the rural area, etc., we have two ways of looking at it. It's many traveling to one, or many to many. So I suppose that's the ethos upon which we work. How can we accommodate that? So many going to one would be our typical, which would have been the day service or the particular sporting event or the particular one-off end destination for so many people to travel to. And the second model then we would look at is many to many, which would be the RRS type service. It's an open schedule type service. To integrate both of those is a challenge, and to cater for everybody is a challenge, I think, that is, it's a big one, because everybody has individual needs. But what we all strive to do is to get the best that we can for all of that. So in looking for many to one and many to many, integrating that is where and possible we can, trying to ensure that no matter where we are, that you can get to where you need to go and get back. That is where we've come from, and that is where we aim to keep going. It is a challenge, and you are right, Seamus, in that getting people to the town is one challenge. Then within the town, to move from one end of it to the other is a second challenge, but we're getting there. I suppose, how do you eat the elephant in small bites? We're getting there. And to take it an area by area, rather than trying to solve all the solutions in one go.
Thank you, Fiona. I just, it's interesting, and there's just a remark come into the chat about we need to recognise the sheer scale of what's needed in terms of rural public transport. And I think you were really pointing to that in your, I know you told me before about meeting the challenges, but as you start to expand on those challenges, it's many, it's complex, and it's diverse in terms of what we're all dealing with here. Maybe, so as this is a kind of it's really opening the field of our conversation. I don't know, I mean, Tim, do you want to add something on this about just a kind of, in essence, how you see it, the importance of transport services for sustainable rural development?
I'm happy to support what Seamus and Fiona have already said there. It's crucial. I mean, it is, if you don't have transport, you're not able to do most of the things that most of us want to do on a very regular basis. That means you're basically going to stay at home or walk a very short distance, particularly in rural Ireland, where walking isn't the same opportunity, or cycling as it might be in towns and cities. So, I mean, one of the challenges we set ourselves, we were trying to think, what is that standard? What is that measure that we would use? And we looked around other geographies, and lots of people use things like, do you live within 400 meters or 500 meters of a bus stop, and that sort of thing. But we decided that measure wasn't really appropriate for what we were trying to do when we were taking that assessment. And the conclusion we came to was, can people live where they need to live, where they want to live, where they do live, and do the things they need to do without having to own a car or having to have access to a car? And the conclusion we came to is that if that, to meet that minimum standard, you need to be able to move from where you live to where you want to go several times a day, not just once a day, and certainly not just twice a week. There need to be several services a day to get most people into, be it work or school or college or whatever, or get to the hub where they can join something else to get to work or school or college or whatever, for people who have a regular pattern of activity. Now, we can't provide that 24/7, but we can provide it for most people who maybe need to be in the bigger town or the regional town by 9:15 or 9 o'clock. We then also need a couple of services during the day for people who want to go and visit friends, or go to the post office, or do some shopping, or go to a hospital appointment, or get a train to go into Dublin or into, you know, wherever they want to go, Sligo or whatever. But then there also needs to be a service in the evening that typically matches the requirements of the service providers in the evenings. And we have some very good examples where, when we've put in evening services, that actually local businesses have flourished on the back of that, because that, well, now that people can get to where we are without needing to drive. And of course, in the evening, if there's alcohol involved, you don't want to be driving anyway. So it's about making the thing useful. And that's the target we've set ourselves. Also, services on a Saturday. And oh my goodness, services on a Sunday in rural Ireland, how dare we? But we are trying to put in services on Sundays as well, so that it's a 7-day-a-week thing, because obviously people want to travel around on a Sunday. So it's all about usefulness. But I wouldn't underestimate the scale of what, I mean, we're very aware in the NTA, the scale of what we're looking at here. Decades of not really dealing with this problem, not having the funding, not having the capacity. That's changing, and you can hear from the political speakers there, from the Minister Ryan himself, there is this desire now to change that. It's going to take time. It's a huge challenge, but the importance of it, I couldn't underestimate. How I don't live in rural Ireland presently. I have done in the past. And without a car, you're thinking, Banjaxed here, and we want to change that.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It's funny, your way of describing it, almost like the day of any of us living in rural Ireland, how we'd wish that to go, where we want to move to, is just reminding me of my own situation here. So I'm living up in rural County Louth, and I had always lived in cities. I'm not from here, so Edinburgh, London, Dublin, and I arrived here, and I have to have a car. Like, there is no public transport close to me. And, you know, the other week the car went to the mechanic. You know, it's just kind of really having that experience of, I must stay in the home or walk a little while, you know, walk around the country roads. So I really directly know that experience. So maybe coming to the close of that question, anything, Deirdre, you would add, just as our kind of opening question, of just why you see this as important, these transport services, in terms of the development of our rural areas sustainably?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned it is more than just a transport service here. You know, it is addressing social isolation. It is enabling people to stay living independently. We have those stories of people who might have needed to move in with relations, but chose to, or now have the choice to stay living independently longer. It is moving. For what happened here was you removed a 2-day-a-week service with large buses, or replaced them with a local link service, smaller buses running 7 days a week, which was an absolute game changer for people. Now it became a service that was more frequent, that people could integrate with their daily lives and make use of, you know, even twice a day, as you mentioned, which was so important. I suppose on the services themselves, it was the design of the services, it was the work that went into the careful design of the services with the local community that really struck us. We initiated conversations with Local Link Kerry back in 2018, and straight away they began working with the local community groups to see how this service could be designed in such a way that it was of maximum benefit, designing the routes around the peninsula. And that's showing in the numbers immediately. Even, you know, when we were under restrictions last year, it just showed immediately the take up, and that's just growing, and more and more people are starting to see how that service can be of benefit to them now.
Thank you, Deirdre. Yeah, and we just have a remark coming into the chat there, just saying that it seems like it's when there have been these localized solutions, that seems to be most, and you know, having a collaborative role from national organizations, but that seems to be the most effective. But it seems to be working better in some local areas, or they're more vibrancy, more organization than in others. So that's, yeah, I wish we could all have what you've been doing in Dingle, or what we have happening up in Sligo and Leitrim and Donegal. So let's just keep sort of exploring those things that we could do. So Tim, we did hear, you know, the kind of an overview of everything that's happening, but maybe if you just, to put it into a sort of the essential points, how would you say the Connecting Ireland plan is really going to improve lives for people in rural areas?
Well, I think it's back to that word usefulness. You know, we can put buses running all over the country, but if they don't happen to go from where people need to get to where, from where they live, then it's a waste of time and effort. And Fiona, I think, characterized it with many to many. You know, we can't run a bus from every house to every shop every day. That would be ludicrous. There's no point in doing that. That would just be hugely costly and very ineffectual. But we can run buses from all communities that go to town several times a day, and people will still have to live life around a timetable. If you have a service 4 or 5 times a day, whatever, clearly you're going to have to organize your life a bit around a timetable. If you happen to be fortunate enough to live in the corridor of the 46A in Dublin, you don't need a timetable, you just go out and get the next bus. But you know, that's for the people who are fortunate that love to live there, or unfortunate enough as the case may be, because there's disadvantages to living in cities, that there's advantages in rural Ireland, of course. So it's about utility, and what we've tried to do is through the consultation process that we did, we had intensive consultation both with local authority officials, with public officials, with clearly a lot of it with the local link offices, and that's an ongoing process. And one of the things I think people need to remember about a network, it's dynamic. It's, you know, it's never fixed in space and time for it to be there forever. And we were very happy to recognize that the first flush of services that will be implemented will be good, but they're not perfect. So we need to keep that conversation going. And things change, new shops, new businesses open up, new housing developments, or people change around. And we need to be made aware of those as well. So it's a constant dialogue as well. You know, this dynamic network that's evolving at the same time as we're doing at the minute, spending a significant additional level of funding. I mean, it's clear, we've already talked about this. By the end of the 5-year Connecting Ireland programme, the additional spend will be somewhere in the order of 50 million per annum. That's a big chunk of budget year on year on year, and we want to build on that even more. So, yeah, it's all about utility. It's all about making it useful. But we can't do that in isolation. If we try to do it in splendid isolation, we'll fail miserably. So there needs to be an awful lot of collaboration and ongoing discussions like this are brilliant, and it gives opportunity for people to see, well, there's that Tim Gaston fella and that Fiona Shea woman, that's the person I need to get onto. And fine, we do. And we need to be told, no, that bus isn't doing quite what it should do. If you tweaked it like this, it might make our lives or our community a bit better.
Yeah, so I really heard this. Well, one aspect of the plan is that it really has to be collaborative, but the other is that it's the plan itself is evolving live as the delivery, the implementation is happening, which is a kind of exciting way to look at it, and is sort of necessary, I think, with the scale of the challenge that we have. Would others like to come in on this, particularly around the Connecting Ireland plan? I don't know, Fiona, you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, I can do. For Leitrim in particular, the Connecting Ireland plan is very successful in that it's for the first time Leitrim they have a connect onward. So everybody can connect either to the train now from the public transport, they can connect onwards to Cavan, to Sligo, to wherever they need to go. It has opened up huge corridors for people to be able to go to college and still live at home, which in its own indirect way is supporting the local community, because those college kids are coming back home. That's sustaining the local community while allowing third level access to continue in a good, sustainable way. Delighted to say indeed that all of our public transport and the RRS services in Leitrim are now nearly at max capacity. So that is a level of success that people have confidence. This is the big one. There's confidence in the service. There is a minimum of 3 services a day. They're all running the 6 to 7 days a week, and they're reliable. I suppose that is the big one. It's the confidence to leave the car at home or get rid of the second car and say, we can use the bus. First of all, it's very affordable. And secondly, it's reliable. So all sorts of different corridors are now opening up for people, for work, for employment, for college. Tourism has taken a big leap forward now for us this year. And I think that is, the more and more we go on, the more and more this is going to open. I think maybe in some indirect way we've created a monster, because where do we go from here? I don't know where. We'll have to sit now and review where we're at and where is the next steps. Like our DRT services are very, very good in that they are getting people. Now there are more people moving now in Leitrim than it ever was before. A little statistic, and the population of Leitrim is only about 36 to 38,000 people. But over 10 to 12% of that population are using the rural services, the RRS services at the moment. But that's very good. That's very high. So something is right. The buses are good. They're all accessible. All our transport is accessible. It is all affordable, and it is reliable. So if you build it and they will come, I think that is the success to it. Yes, there had to be tweaks made without question. As Tim said, yeah, we got it in the neck a few times. We've missed maybe a cohort or a parish or something. But yes, we can wriggle it. We can move it with a willingness for everybody. So yeah, it can, and Connecting Ireland, if it can continue to do what it says on the tin and work from the bottom up, I suppose, than a top-down approach, I think it can be very successful. But it is very important to me that it is worked at from the bottom in collaboration with all the stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. And I love this, if it is good, if it is reliable, if it's dependable, yes, then it's actually being used. And I mean, maybe I'm just going to hold that in the context of, yes, we one of the things we want to do in this forum is learn from areas of great practice where things are really working well. And of course, just acknowledging it's not like this everywhere currently. And that's certainly coming through in the chat as well. It's kind of, there's places where that isn't functioning that well, and we're in the different kind of cycle, the more negative cycle. So I wish we could learn from what you're doing. Just thinking of Seamus, Deirdre, did you have things you wanted to add on the Connecting Ireland plan, or should I move on to some of the other themes we wanted to explore? Oh yeah, Seamus, I'll just ask you to unmute.
Yeah, just in case I don't get to mention, I would love the discussion to move into a couple of areas where even this budget could look at. One of the annoying bugbears, it is linked to transport. It is the whole area of school transport, and one of the annoying bugbears that we're getting from members all the time is the fact that if you're less than 4 kilometers from the school, you have to find your own way. And on rural roads, that can be tricky, especially in the winter. And we would be saying that should have been dropped long ago, because it's simply not safe. The second thing I think is that we need to really find ways and means of developing what I call the e-car or the shared car system, because there is a large group of people who, you know, the routes, even in, let's say, the 37% area, those, you know, there is nowhere you can develop routes. I know people have been trying out in the different local links, different route systems, but unfortunately, sometimes the route, even when it's laid on with the best of intentions, people don't use it because the population is too scattered, and the times that the routes are on are just not working out or not suitable. So I think we have a huge amount of work still to do, and I think we need, and again, I commend the imagination and the genius of Local Link, who are trying all sorts of ideas, but I really would love to see a lot more ideas in this area, because there is a lot of people still not able to access transport in rural areas, especially in those more isolated areas. And as I said earlier, some of the provincial towns could do with a better internal transport system as well.
Thank you, Seamus. Yeah, I think this is important to have this. We want to have this balance of hearing where it is working really well, but also what are the challenges that still are there that we need to tackle. What I'm going to do is, just to keep us moving, is actually, Deirdre, I'd like to turn to you with a kind of specific question, and or there's actually sort of two parts. We had a question, and also there's things coming through as well. But it was just to really ask you if you could share just a few gems of your experience of really sort of building sustainability into these future transport solutions, and what's made it successful. What is it that you've done in Dingle Hub that has really made that successful, that maybe others could learn from?
Well, I suppose we should point out we're still very much on the journey. We can't call it successful yet until we have achieved lots of it. But what I suppose the experience we've had is a good understanding, working with the SCAI for our Energy Master Plan, a good understanding that we needed to tackle transport, that pointed us immediately in the direction of Local Link Kerry. We had the benefit as well of the ESB Networks project and the electric vehicle trials. And through all of the different projects, what we have done over time is built a very strong links within the community here. So you have numerous groups who are very active in the area of sustainable mobility. You know, there's a very active ride sharing group here. There are the trial ambassadors with a really good understanding of the electric vehicles. There's a growing cohort of people embracing electric bikes and cargo bikes as that solution to get into possibly the car sharing mobility hub within the town itself. So that is all growing, and the hub itself, I suppose, is enabling a level of convening of all those groups, which in turn I would hope is seen as providing some momentum for them, so people can see that they are being empowered to take action, and that's so important to keep things moving here. So if I was to impart any gem, it is that function of convening within a community, which oftentimes happens through volunteer groups, but we know that, you know, doing things on a voluntary basis can be very limited. So the benefit we've had is to have the organization in place and to have had a level of funding for this. And one of the points that we would make is that it is such an important organizational structure to have within a community. And there's a really great opportunity to align that hub structure with sustainable energy community structures now, and to, you know, to enable the hubs to support the communities to do that, because it's that convening and it's that empowering of the local community and bringing groups together is where we really see the magic happening.
Yeah, thank you, Deirdre. I love that word convening. I think really speaks to it, because in a sense then we harness and celebrate the power of volunteer work, volunteer passion, volunteer organizing, but it does need a coordinating or something that to really help it become integrated and maybe make an impact across a whole area. And I can hear that's really the core function the hub can play. So that sounds really exciting. I hope that this can happen more, and I think that will be really useful for the rest of us that are exploring this or developing this in other areas. Yes, hearing about, yes, of course, we have volunteer centres with us here, which is fantastic. And I know from my experience in volunteering as well. So we're kind of coming towards the end of the discussion, and I'm going to keep going with maybe more specific questions for each person. So just turning back to, oh, I can hear some seagulls there, so beautiful. Just turning back to you, Fiona. One thing we'd love to know is just, yes, in terms of the actual pilot, because I know you've done this pilot in Leitrim. It's completed its first 1-year cycle. So, and it was an integrated transport pilot. So yes, I guess maybe similar to what I was asking Deirdre, what lessons have you learned from that? What would you draw out of that could be, useful for us to hear and inspiring today?
Well, I suppose the first thing was that it had to have a buy-in from all of our stakeholders, which were the HSE, the NTA, and the people themselves, the travelling public. So to get the three all onto the one hymn sheet was a challenge in itself, but that came on board, all came, and there had to be a willingness of wriggle room. So the HSE, in their provision of their day services, to enable to incorporate them onto DRT services, there had to be a willingness to maybe move opening times, closing times, and indeed in some situations they had to move their day to allow for the integration of the services. And in fairness, that did happen. We were very lucky in that regard, that over the process of maybe 12 months of pulling all the bits and pieces together, there was buy-in and full cooperation from all of them. The learning is that you have to have patience to let everything settle and to take it as not a criticism, but as a positive when people come with suggestions to say that, well, maybe this isn't the best route, this is a possible other option we could look at. So taking that as a positive rather than criticisms, go with it, try these things out and let them settle. And most of the time, the advice from people on the ground is correct. They have the right approach to it and they know best. Going forward, where we're at now is our capacity is going to be an issue. We now have to look to the next stage as tourism seems to be growing very much with us. How do we accommodate bicycles on tours? The next stage, it's the next element. The lessons we've learned is we now need to provide park and rides facilitations also, because we now have got a number of people onto the bus, but those that have to come to meet the bus, instead of them driving on into town, let's get them to park up and come onto the bus. So we do have a number of good challenges. There are positive challenges ahead. The learning, I suppose, is that patience. Patience is the key to all of this. I would be very much, I need it now and I want it now type of person. That is not how these things happen. They have to allow everybody the time to adjust, and particularly the traveling public. This was a whole new concept for them. Their times, plus the fact that I don't think they were initially trusting that this, there's this another big talk shop about this wonderful plan, but it actually was there. It opened Leitrim up as a whole county, whereas before it was just pockets. You could travel within your own little pocket, but now you can travel the length and breadth of Leitrim, plus onward connections. There are very little negatives actually to take from it. I know that sounds a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the infrastructure now to follow, we need that. We need the next steps, but for the public transport on the ground, getting people out, that has been very successful. It's 12 months plus now just gone. We're at full patronage on most of our services. So that in itself, I think, is the success. People believe in it now. They believe it can happen and they trust it. Yes, and I'm delighted to say too that from an accessible point of view, we have quite a lot of patronage now on people who heretofore could not have used public transport. That is very positive also. And I don't really know what else to say in a learning, in that patience, time, talking to all the stakeholders and listening and taking everybody's in, and then deciding what is the best that can be done to cater for the most people going to the most places. That is my summing of it, really. Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. And I think what stood out for me was just one of the points you made there is that what you found is the people on the ground, us, the citizens on the ground, do tend to know best. They do know we do know what's needed. And it sounds to me like you were willing to listen to that, it takes time to develop a relationship and a relationship of trust, but it sounds like in the end the proof is in the pudding. You know,
Yeah.
people realize this isn't just talking, we really are being heard, it really is being implemented, and using the pilot format was a way to actually get these things in practice. So fantastic, thank you. So we're going to move, so I'll just, having heard from Deirdre, Fiona, and just maybe turn to you, Tim, in our last minute or two, and then we'll come to Seamus. I think now it's really just, if there's anything there left for you to say, either as a particular opportunity you see that we should be looking at, or a particular challenge that is still to be overcome in terms of what we've been discussing today, maybe just leave you to kind of give your final words as we come to the end of our panel, and I'll just invite you to unmute. Just need to click on the unmute button.
Yeah, the seagulls were in the
Oh, that was yours
beside me here, so that's why I muted. It's nice to have the seagulls out. I was very struck listening to the minister, and it's something we're exploring internally as well, as to what can we do with technology. I mean, technology doesn't answer all of our problems all of the time, but there is something there that we would like to explore more, which is around using our apps. I think most of us, not all, and we still need to have a telephone option as well, but to use the app and exploit the potential of that, to use the algorithms that are already in use in other parts of the world to provide a demand responsive. So where a schedule hasn't got the capacity, hasn't got the critical mass to require a scheduled service, can we do something else that's demand responsive and that maybe operates for most of the day? We're even exploring, could it run as a schedule in the morning and evening peaks perhaps? You know, people want to know that there's certainty, and outside of that it runs as demand responsive. Can it interface with schools transport? Can it interface with HSE transport? A lot of questions need to be asked and answered there. That will need resource. It will need people with imagination, people with skills and technology. And the minister is still on the call. It will need funding as well, of course. And we will have to learn by doing on this one, because we don't have app-based DRT in Ireland at the present time. But there's definitely something there that we would like to explore once we can get the right people on board and get the funding. And I think there is a willingness to try that out. And if that proves successful, and again, it'll be a pilot, and if we can get that right, then that's something we could then, you know, relatively rapidly roll out to other areas where there just isn't the critical mass to do a scheduled service.
Thank you, Tim. Good to hear about the possible technological developments. And turning to you, Seamus, is similar. So just anything remaining that you would like to say is either a key kind of opportunity that we should be looking at, or a challenge that we still need to address. I know you raised some particularly in the area of school transport earlier, so just invite you to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. And again, I think many of the things have already been said. I do like, as I said, the work done in Leitrim. I do like the work done in Deirdre's presentation. It shows how you can take an area which we would have been saying Irish Rural Link, and really concentrating on how you involve the various players, the various people in that area. Even in the Midlands where I live, there's areas where, even where I live myself, and there are lots of people still don't have access, real access. You know, they would have to go, maybe it's too long of a journey. It's as far to go to meet the bus as it is to go to the town, so they don't do it. So I think that kind of approach, that local approach, as Fiona said, from the bottom up, would need to be established in almost everywhere in the country, because otherwise we kind of have great work done in some areas which makes everyone else jealous, and other areas which, I'm afraid, as you said yourself, without the car you'd be lost. And I think, you know, that's the big thing to remember. The number of cars needed in rural areas is still high, and the opposition that came very loudly when it was suggested that people should get rid of the second car, there is huge opposition to that. And the reason is people do not see the alternative. And I think we have a lot of challenges there. So a local approach, something like what Deirdre or Fiona has talked about, really is the way forward.
Thank you, Seamus. Good words to close on as we sort of summarise everything that we've talked about, and having heard from these fantastic initiatives in different local areas, and really holding out a vision for this happening in every local area of our country, and maybe many more pilots, as Tim spoke to. There will be new pilots. Can we be testing this out in absolutely every corner, and really getting to develop that kind of convened collaboration of our voluntary communities with a real sort of national support for this to develop. So thank you so much for our contributors today. So Tim Gaston, Deirdre Davoli, Fiona O'Shea and Seamus Boland, and thank you for such a rich conversation. And I'll take you down from the online stage now and just connecting with everyone else about what we'll be doing in the last section of our forum today. So thank you all. And as I'm doing that, I wanted to come back. There have been, I know people have been patiently waiting to, we talked about having an open floor and questions and so on. I wanted to just share what our plan was for today. So one of the challenges in these large fora is to find a way for everyone to have a voice and for everyone to speak. So what we actually have planned now is to just have a short moment. We haven't got long to go, so it'll be just 10 minutes connecting to colleagues across the country, fellow citizens, fellow practitioners that are here today, and say what's on your mind there. We have some questions that we're sort of interested in. That's the theme of this forum. We're particularly looking at really, well, what is the priority focus for developing public transport in rural areas over the coming times, you could say over the next 20 years? What are the key opportunities? What are the challenges that may be there? A bit similar to as we were just discussing with our panelists right now. So I'm afraid we're not opening the floor quite yet, and thank you very much, Kieran and Mr. Pratt there. I know we've already been in exchange, but I am going to do that just so there's a chance for as many people as possible to speak. So you'll find yourself in a breakout room. If you need anything, there's a button there to ask for help, and then we'll come back. And also I'd like to invite people to put written remarks into a collective record of what we're discussing, and then hopefully hear a few voices as well. So let me open up those breakout rooms. Oh, here they are. Yeah. And if you need anything, do just let me know, and I will definitely come and help. So I'll also actually just put those the kind of themes that we've been looking at into the chat here, just so you've kind of got them as a reference. So wishing you a good conversation, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
Thanks, Ali. I'll keep it very short because I'm interested to hear what others might have to say as well at the end. But just to say thanks on behalf of the Department of Rural and Community Development to Minister Ryan for his contribution as well today, and of course everybody else as well who's attended and contributed, but especially Fiona, Deirdre, and Seamus, and of course Tim as well. I've got a particular interest in this area. A lot of the people on this today will know that. I've had a few good conversations with Tim of late. I've met all the local link providers, I think it was last month, in Portlaoise, and I was down in Kerry recently as well to see what they're doing there as well. And I grew up in rural Ireland myself, so I'm quite aware of a lot of the challenges involved as well. And I think it's just, I suppose it's important for us as in the Department of Rural and Community Development that we host these Rural Ideas Fora. And I think it was particularly important that we did one on rural transport. It's been very, very useful. Couldn't catch all the feedback there that was coming through, but looking forward to getting the documents afterwards. And I think when we developed our overarching strategy, the Rural Future Strategy, we did hold extensive consultations across the country, and the subject of public transport and rural transport came up quite a bit. So it was very important that we did this event today. I think you'll see from Tim and from Minister Ryan that there is a very strong high-level commitment here to investing in public transport, and the manifestation of that, I suppose, is the Connecting Ireland Rural Mobility Plan. And it was great to just get a little bit more detail on that today, but just to assure you that level of commitment there as well. I think it's important to point out as well that public transport in rural Ireland is not just about getting from A to B. It means different things for different people. So for young people, I think, and I would work a lot in this area, it's about a sense of independence. For older generations, it's a huge link to their community. It's a way of preventing isolation. Obviously, it supports journeys to school and to college and work and social events as well. But crucially, from my own point of view, it encourages community development, and it encourages inclusion, and obviously as well supports sustainable methods of travel and our climate action efforts as well. And you know, I spoke to a lot of my colleagues here in the department in terms of how we as a department on the community development side of the house are involved in kind of supporting particularly community transport initiatives as well. And there was quite a few areas, just to mention some of them. The community enhancement program that we have supports local community development committees to part fund the purchase of community vehicles. The community services program under my remit supports staff that also facilitate various community transport initiatives, from bringing older people into day centres, into social events as well. We also have, and I want to give a shout out to electric bikes, because I don't know if they've got specific mention yet, but I think there's potential there in that side of things as well. We also run a pilot bike upcycling scheme in 5 different areas across the country as well, to bring cycling to people who cannot always afford it, but also to train people in repairing bikes as well and give people skills, but also to promote electric bikes. Our volunteer centres have been mentioned, and they're under my remit as well, and indeed Leitrim Volunteer Centre is doing amazing work in this regard as well, and of course the Fora programme as well. And then briefly, just to give mention to some of my other roles in the Department of Social Protection under community employment programmes, we have a lot of participants in CE and the Rural Social Scheme and TUS who are actually involved in supporting community transport initiatives as well. So I suppose the bottom line is, and it's come up in different ways during today's discussion, there is a lot of energy, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of answers, and indeed there's already a lot of functioning models and answers coming from the ground up from community groups as well. But we do need to improve infrastructure, we do need to improve facilities, and by doing this we can build better communities as well. So I think for me, bottom line, better public transport in rural Ireland, particularly from my remit, it means bringing people together, it means making communities stronger, it means doing so in an affordable way, and particularly in rural settings as well. And a couple of things that struck me from today as well is that innovation, I think, is key, listening to people on the ground, and different approaches as well. It's going to need a variety of different approaches, but key to all that is that the different approaches need to fit together, and that's the old integrated services term as well. And indeed, I think sharing good practice, I think, is important as well. In our chat room there briefly, we spoke about how great the situation in Dingle is, and I've seen it more widely in Kerry as well, and it's impressive. As Deirdre said, it's a work in progress, but there's no reason why that can't be replicated elsewhere as well. I think these forums are good for getting things started, but I think there's probably a need for more detailed discussion between the local link groups about how to do that as well. But obviously the resourcing issue is key as well. So look, just to reiterate and to wrap up, our Rural Future, the department's key policy document, is very, very committed, and we're committed to expanding local link, piloting new transport initiatives, and based on just enhancing the quality of life for people and communities in Ireland. And thanks very much for everyone for your input and participation today.